What am I doing? I'm talking to an empty telephone.
I don't understand.
Because there was a dead man on the other end of this fucking line.
The Before Trilogy. Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, Before Midnight. Directed by Richard Linklater and starring Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy. Isn't everything we do in life just a way to be loved a little more? I'm Liam Waite. Welcome to Corona Cinema. I'm joined as always by Matty.
Good evening.
Ross.
Good evening.
And Mason Carr.
Hello, you alright?
And since this is our first trilogy, makes sense to go in chronological order, doesn't it? Which means we're going to start with Before Sunrise, so 1995, which I believe was Matty's pick. A young man and woman meet on a train in Europe and wind up spending one evening together in Vienna. Linklater also co-wrote the screenplay with Kim Krizan, and reportedly Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy had a hand in the screenplay as well. Didn't get a credit on this film, however. But Matty, I'm not going to ask you why you picked this film because it's a trilogy, so you kind of had a very limited choice. But you're the only one who had seen one of these films going into this week. So what did you make of your rewatch?
So yeah, as you said, I've seen this film quite a while ago. I think nearly 3 years ago now. I think it was on the top 250 IMDb list. I'm not sure the other two made it, but this one definitely did. And I think it is the strongest of the three, to be fair. I think the most effort went into this, and the clarity that they set up with the first film kind of just helped the other two films coast afterwards. But they really do work as a package deal. I think if you want to get like what the director intended from these films, you have to watch all of them together. And in an interview with Ethan Hawke, he says this film is really about what might be, and then the next film is about what could or should be, and the last film, what is. And what might be is quite potent for this film because it's a very hopeful, romantic film. Because you have these two people literally at the height of their freedom and lack of responsibility, and it's a dreamlike film. The circumstances that these two people meet and how everything seems to just work out for the 2 hours that they're together, and they kind of just like fall in love. And the script itself, and just the film, is very bare as well because it's literally just these two people. I don't think there's another character in the film that has more than 3 lines strung together. I think possibly the poet that they meet by the shore, or by the bank of the river. That's probably the next person who has the most amount of lines, and he's literally a fleeting character in the whole film. And so yeah, you just look at these two people and their connection, and the film being set at night as well is really, really quiet. And you literally just manage to focus on the relationship that these two people manage to dwell in such a short space of time. Another thing I like about the film is the fact that it's not from like Ethan Hawke's perspective or Julie Delpy's perspective. It's both of them, and you can see that, as you said, with the script writing, that even though Linklater wrote the script, he was also co-written. What was her name? Kim Krizan. So the script was co-written by Kim Krizan as well. So you kind of had that female insight to it, and then also, as you said, Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy heavily edited the script as well to work in kind of an equal perspective, so that this film literally appeals to men and women equally. So there's like, it's not kind of like a biased view of a relationship. It's a realistic, wholesome thing that like every couple can like look at and kind of like draw things from. And also it's got that kind of that bittersweet ending because the whole film is on that ticking timer, like whether they're going to have to leave at the end of it, and then it's kind of that decision, and whether they're going to meet again is kind of left on that cliffhanger. And I think this film could work really well literally just by itself, but what the director kind of aimed to do was literally just capture the connection that these two people had, and that was literally all he had to do, and I think he did that really well. So yeah, I wouldn't really fault the film because I think it does everything it's meant to do. And the film takes its time, which is nice, and it's much more cinematic than the other two. I think definitely because I watched this one last because I was rewatching it so I could compare to the other two. Just the beginning with the kind of very orchestral music, and then following the lines of the track, the train. It feels a lot more cinematically put together than the others. And there's more of a balance between the variety of shots they use. Especially the second film uses leading shots and one shots throughout the whole film, and it kind of gets a bit distracting because then you try and look for the bits that they splice it in together. With this film, they actually use camera angles which change every now and then, feeling a bit more natural, so you're not like getting sucked into how they're filming it. Even though they do use the one shots, it doesn't feel as unnatural as the others. And it was, the last thing I'd say is it reminded me of Call Me By Your Name. A very slow, kind of picturesque, dreamlike state that you just focus on the connection between two people. I really enjoyed the film, and I think it's the strongest of the three.
Yeah, this is my favorite trilogy of all time. Like, it's really I think it's nearly like 5 hours altogether of just like discursive, philosophical conversations between these two people, and somehow it's still like it's entertaining the whole way through, and like just always rewatchable. Like, the time goes really fast when you're watching these films. I find, like, even the ones like this one's an hour 40. The second one's like an hour 20, but the other one's an hour 50. But they all seem to just flow really nicely, and I think that's a testament to the quality of the writing. And I like this whole like situation of him meeting this girl on a train, going through Europe, and then convincing her to step off and walk with him around a nice old historic European city for a night. It's just a very romantic and idealistic kind of situation. That was something you'd hope to experience. And it's I like the brief awkward moment when they first make the decision to do it, and they come outside the station. He says like, "Oh, that bridge is nice." In that moment, they think, "Oh, what the fuck do I say now? I've just convinced this random person to get off the train." So, "Oh, this bridge is nice." Like, they haven't even exchanged names by the time they get off the train, but they're just swept up in this moment. They've had a connection. They've swept up in this moment, so they're just like, "Yeah, fuck it, let's do it." And I feel like this is a proper like pre-smartphone movie, but it just doesn't happen in the age of the smartphones. Like, from them actually striking up a conversation because they're probably just in their phone doing whatever whilst they're on the train. They're not even looking up at people. Like, I don't want to talk to people when I'm on a train. I'm just in my phone listening to a podcast or whatever. Like, fuck off. I don't want to see anyone. But and like, even just remaining entirely like immersed in the conversation throughout the night. Like, at some point you're just going to, like, nowadays you just check your phone for something, whereas they're just like, you're only focused on that person. There's no distractions. And like, yeah, even like you mentioned the ending as well, where they kind of they don't exchange phone numbers, and they talk about that in the second film, how like kind of silly that was. But that was kind of to keep up the romantic like pretense. But if it was happening now, it's like you have them on Snapchat or something. It's like you don't know where they are, but like, you'd see them on Snap Maps in it. So it's not quite as poetic. And they would even agree to just not see each other for 6 months. They'd just be on FaceTime, but every other day. They're really going to like pursue this relationship. So yeah, it's just a very kind of callback to a simpler time, perhaps a more romantic time. Mason, is that something you feel about the film? Is this more of a simpler time, something you wouldn't get nowadays?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, like, because of all like technology and stuff like that, it's hard to achieve that scenario. You almost wish that you could have that experience yourself. And to be fair, when I was watching the film, it really reminded me of when me and Matty went interrailing a few years ago, and we started speaking to this woman on the train to Prague because she asked us to look after our bags. And that's like the beginning of the film when they started speaking to each other just randomly on this train going through Europe. It felt like, I don't know, it felt really like wholesome, and so I was like, oh, like, because it reminded me of that time myself. But at the same time, like you said, this whole like romantic journey feels really like unachievable in today's time, because like even at the end, like you said, when they're like, oh, like, should we exchange phone numbers? Like, no, we'll just meet back here in 6 months. Like, you would never do that nowadays. Like, there is no way you'd just agree to meet someone in 6 months' time. Like, the whole idea of waiting that such a long period of time, voluntarily not speaking to someone, seems so like bizarre to us. And I think the film really does sort of encapsulate that time period like really well.
I like how they're both kind of cynical in their own different ways. Like she talks a lot about like the environment being destroyed and the media trying to control our minds and stuff like that. They're very like so at times they can seem quite pretentious in the way they talk. At sometimes they go overboard, but most of the time this is quite profound, interesting conversation, which is better than something you might have with your mates. Like there's something more deeper going on with the way they talk, and it's interesting and kind of helps them forge this connection. But even still, like, they're still cynical in their own way. Like she's in that way, but at the same time, she still enjoys being swept off her feet. She still enjoys this romantic situation. She wants to have her fortune told by this woman in the street. She wants to believe that there's something kind of deeper going on, I guess, in her life. Whereas he's completely against all that stuff. It's like, oh, she's just trying to scam you. Like he's not convinced by her abilities or anything like that. And that, like the best example of his like cynicism is with the homeless guy, who's also a poet, and he's like, oh yeah, he probably just wrote that poem already, and just inserts the word that you give him into the poem. Like she's like, oh my god, I can't believe you just managed to pull that off in a few minutes. A beautiful poem. He's like, nah, he had that poem done already, just inserted the word in there. It's a nice example of his cynicism. I think even he, like deep down, is a romantic. He doesn't want to believe that life is just tedious and monotonous, as he puts it. Because he wants to create his own TV show that literally amplifies like the beauty of like the simple things in life. So I think deep down he kind of wants to believe there's something more to life than just the run of the mill stuff that you got to do every day. Ross, what did you make of these two, their relationship and their connection and the things that they talked about throughout this 100-minute film?
I think their relationship and the things they do talk about, it kind of, because you're introduced quite early on to both of the characters and kind of the way they are, and that makes it interesting throughout the film, because I think their opposing views is what is building their relationship, because they're talking and they're having not even, it's kind of like a friendly debate kind of thing. They're having a lot throughout the whole film, and it makes the film interesting to watch. But yeah, it's kind of their opposing views and the way they feel about things, which is what kind of, yeah, they build their relationship on. It's their opposing views, which is really nice to watch, and watching them blossom in this way, and the relationship blossom because of what they're talking about, and it kind of drives their relationship. And them just doing this just kind of makes you want to do it yourself. You want to just go explore Vienna for a day, or go to Europe, stop somewhere and just kind of go explore it for the day. I mean, you wouldn't want to do that in the UK because you'd probably end up in like Birmingham or Sheffield and be a bit disappointed. But yeah, it's quite nice.
I feel like there's just like something, I'm going to use the word romantic again, and I'm probably going to use it 10 more times on this podcast, but there's something in it like inherently romantic about old European cities. It seems like, don't know what it feels like, the cobblestone streets and something about the architecture just feels intimate. There's something intimate about these kind of cities. I don't know if there's, because you don't live there, like where people have that same perception of London. Like I can't imagine, like I enjoy London and its architecture, but you don't perceive it to be that same kind of intimate feeling that is conveyed by places like Vienna or Paris or anything like that.
And yeah, we talk about locations later on, I think, and definitely this is probably some of the best films out there for leading a conversation stimulated by the locations that they're in and the way they transition through all of these really, really beautiful locations. And it you do kind of feel like you're going on that journey with them, because you're seeing everything at the natural speed that they would if they were walking normally. And you can only really pick up when they're using the one shot transitions every now and then. You have to be quite like what's it called when you're really like focusing? You have to be really quite focused to see these. Every now and then they'll be like, oh, look at this, and then they'll do like a zoom in on a little market or some little dogs or some birds on the thing, and then they'll use that if they need to cut it if one of them is messed up every now and then. But you definitely get that you kind of like that vibe that you're actually there, and it feels really natural, and almost dreamlike as well. Something we'll talk about later.
I like the contrast of this whole serene kind of adventure they're going on through the streets of Vienna. The contrast between that and there's that one bit with the American guy in the restaurant. He's like, "Yeah, where's the waitress in New York? She would have been fired." It's like kind of this brash American guys, like the idea of everything just has to be in a rush. Everyone's got to be on a hustle. Whereas they're just European cities, they're just relaxed. They're just going about their business, enjoying life. Mason, did you enjoy your time with Jesse and Celine walking through the streets of Vienna?
Yeah, I think both the characters are like such a joy to watch, and I think the thing that I picked up the most is that it almost doesn't feel like there's a script. It's almost like they've just been told, right, speak about these few things as you walk down this road, because like because the delivery oh, because the delivery of the script is so, it feels so natural, and it's probably the most natural delivery I've seen in a film, because they speak like that's not so stupid, but they speak exactly how you would if you were just having a conversation. It doesn't feel like a Hollywood film that I'm watching when it comes to what they're saying. And yeah, there's this really like human feel, and something that I feel like everyone can relate to when you are just walking down the street chatting shit to someone. And that's what makes the journey with both of them like so enjoyable, especially like for me, because it feels so realistic, and it feels so human. Instead of, it doesn't feel like acting, it feels like I'm just watching someone record these two random people going like down the road. Yeah,
in terms of how natural the dialogue is, I like in that bit when it feels kind of like a movie when he kisses her for the first time, or he tries to play it off like it's a movie, because that's how you would, that's like sort of how you would approach it, because everyone's been consuming movies, so you got to try and make it as like stylish as possible in that like a big moment like that. But then she calls him out on it like a few minutes later when he tries to pretend like he's not a romantic person. It's like, yeah, what was that out there then? You're trying to give it the big one out there. So I like that. I like that. I think they call it, even when it's not as, the dialogue's not as natural, there's a reason for that, and she calls him out on it. So that's another good thing about the script. And yeah, you mentioned how it's just really impressive acting to be able to pull this off. Like, I don't know how long the takes are for each scene of them just having a conversation for several minutes. Like, I don't know how long you go for. Do you just do the whole thing in one go? And how many takes do you do? Like, I don't know what goes into filming something like this. Ross, do you think, were you impressed with the efforts on an acting front in this film to be able to carry off such a film about conversations, be able to carry off and make it so entertaining for the whole time?
Yeah, because realistically, there's a lot of actors that wouldn't be able to do that. It's very hard to kind of just be so natural reading off a script. Like, yeah, it's probably so much harder than it seems. Just like how they keep it so natural is really impressive, and like both the performances, they kind of, that no one's particularly better than the other in this film, I don't think. And it's kind of this the naturalness of it, which kind of keeps you consumed with the film, indulged with the film, and it makes you feel like you're there with them, because it's so just like raw and natural. It just makes you feel like you're walking around Vienna with them, and it's like a fly on the wall watching them kind of blossom. Yeah, and I think because of this, it makes the film like kind of more depressing at the end when they leave each other. And it's a weird feeling you get at the end, because it's like you're so sad that leaving each other, but you kind of have an overwhelming sense of happiness for them that they found each other and spent this night together as well.
Matty, the first time you watched it, were you thinking about how like they're gonna proceed after this night is over? Like, were you thinking, are they gonna have to spend this night together, then maybe they don't see each other again? Or because during the film, when I watched it for the first time, I was really thinking about that, because they don't really address it until maybe like 35 minutes left of the film, when she's like, yeah, so what are we gonna do after this is all over? I think it's when they're in the like restaurant, and they're doing that like kind of role play with her pretending to be his friend, and he's pretending to be her friend kind of thing. I think that's when they first bring it up. But were you thinking about that watching the film before they actually bring it up?
I don't think I was particularly. The first time I watched it, I wasn't even aware that there was going to be 2 sequels, and that I kind of flow with the conversation as they do. And when they start worrying about kind of the constraints of, I need to get this plane and you need to get that train, and we won't be seeing each other again, and then you live in the US and I live here, and it's not going to work. And you kind of like, I don't know, I feel a bit detached because they're not my problem, so I don't think about them too much. So it's like I kind of just fly just as at the speed that they go. And when they start talking about, oh, this is going to be a problem, this is that, I don't know. I think it applies to then two different type of people, like the romantic people thinking, oh yeah, they'll do this, they'll make it work, and then the cynical people saying, yeah, nah, they're just gonna it's gonna fizzle out, like there's gonna be no chance of distance. And I think that's what the films kind of highlight. So if you're sat on the sofa with someone and you'll end up disagreeing over this, you know, it kind of like shows the different character types that would watch this film.
Okay, should we get some ratings? Start with you, Matty.
I gave it an 8.4. I feel like the dialogue is really quite strong for even a romantic film. Yeah, and I think it achieves what it's meant to do.
Ross?
Yeah, as Matty said, it completely achieves what it's trying to do. And at the end, it kind of, you want to watch the second film and find out kind of what's going on. And yeah, so I gave it an 8.3.
Mason?
Yeah, it was such like a unique experience watching it for the first time. So yeah, I gave it a 8.3.
I'll also give it an 8.3. And fast forward 9 years to Before Sunset, 2004, which was Mason's pick. 9 years after Jesse and Celine first met, they encounter each other again on the French leg of Jesse's book tour. This time, Hawke and Delpy both got a screenplay credit, and it was actually Oscar nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. Mason, what did you expect? After watching Before Sunrise, were you the cynical person who didn't think they would meet again, that they wouldn't meet in 6 months? Or were you thinking, oh, they reconnect in 6 months and they get together? Where were you at when you started watching Before Sunset?
Yeah, I felt a bit cheated on, to be honest. Like, I was like, I'm adamant they're going to meet in 6 months, because the way it ends in the first one was like, yeah, it's going to happen. Like, I feel like because the first one gets you so wrapped up in their one-day relationship, you're adamant because they like portray how much they actually love each other. You're like, yeah, sweet, it's going to happen. They're going to see each other in 6 months. So then when the film starts and it's 9 years later, I was just like, okay. And then I was like, have they seen each other? And then, yeah, you get hit with that like harsh reality. And I think that's what the film sort of shows really well, is kind of, it kind of like teases it, I think, in this one. And then the last one's like the hard hitting reality of life. Because this one just shows you that like not everything is a film, and that realistically stuff does happen. Like she said, they didn't give each other their numbers. Her nan passed away. What else could they do? And that's true. And even when they said that, they could have crossed paths because they lived so close together in America. And I think, yeah, for me, that was like what I enjoyed so much about this film, was the fact that it reminds you, no, you're watching a film. Like, yeah, you're watching a film, but not everything in life is a film, and it doesn't work the way you want it to. So yeah, I did feel a bit cheated compared to the beginning of the film from what I was expecting.
I think this whole trilogy is kind of an experiment in a way, in terms of having, first of all, just with the first film, having just two people walking around having long conversations. That's not really a common thing you see in a film. And having it where you revisit this couple every 9 years, or 9 years after the first one, then 9 years again afterwards. It's all kind of an experiment. And obviously, Richard Linklater is known for that, having done Boyhood, where I think that's over 12 years, maybe a bit less. And he's got a film with Beanie Feldstein that they're filming over like 20 years. So he's a big fan of these like filmmaking experiments. And this film, Before Sunset, is kind of the experiment within the experiment, because the whole film plays out in real time. And I think it gives it more of like an urgency. Like we mentioned how I was kind of more relaxed in the first film. This one, having it play out in real time, where they literally have like less time to do it. Like Vienna, I don't know how long they were together, maybe like 12 hours or something like that, maybe a bit more. When this film is literally the hour, 20-minute runtime of the film is what he should, unless he would, I don't know if he got back on that plane. Hinted at that he might not have got on that plane at the end of the film. But the suggestion is that, yeah, he might not have. But if he did, and they only had an hour and 20 minutes to reconnect and rediscover the feelings that they had 9 years beforehand. And I like when he does reach her apartment at the end, that's when you realize just how comfortable they are in each other's company. Obviously, their chemistry came back pretty much straight away, and that was believable as well, which I think is impressive. Like, you didn't think, if you like met someone once and then met them again 9 years later, you wouldn't think you'd be able to like strike up a conversation as smooth as they do. But I think it is believable in terms of the writing and the performances of the the two actors. So I think that makes sense. But yeah, I think that was just really impressive. How the chemistry was just back straight away when I watched it. Like, didn't feel, it felt like it had been 9 years, but at the same time it didn't, because they were so on point with each other. And now talked about how he was kind of the more cynical one in this coupling in the first film. It's kind of sort of flipped in a sense this time, because she's even more cynical than she was, and she's kind of less hopeful than he is. I think in part because he's in this like loveless marriage and wants to believe that there's a way out of it. He's not going to be trapped in this marriage because he wants to stay with the mother of his kid for the sake of the kid. Like, he wants to believe there is something more out there for him. So I think he's a bit more hopeful than she is. Whether she's had like a string of relationships that have failed. It's that scene in the car, which I think is like her most impressive acting out of the three films, where she's like reflecting on all her ex-partners getting engaged, and she's like, why didn't they ask me to get engaged? I would have said no, but it would have been nice for them to ask. Like, she just feels like she hasn't been able to recapture the romance that she experienced on that night in Vienna. She hasn't been able to kind of find that again with any person in the 9 years subsequent to that. So it's pretty sorrowful, this film. I think not as enjoyable as the first film, but I think that's kind of a thing with this trilogy. It progressively gets a bit more depressing in a way, while still being entertaining and enjoyable. The ideas about life and aging and relationships and stuff kind of gets more depressing. Matty, is that something you thought watching this film, that after the hope and the joy of just connecting with someone for the first time, it's now 9 years later and one's in a loveless marriage, the other one's had a string of unsuccessful relationships, and it's kind of sad?
Yeah, you definitely pick up that straight away. These two people have kind of been not beaten up by, but weighed down by life for the last 9 years. And like the conversations that they're having, they're much more grounded and they're less kind of like philosophical and dreamy and what if, what could be, and they're much more like just stuck in the mud of just their own lives and all the barriers that stop them from doing the things they want to do. And you kind of see these two people interact now on a much more realistic level, because the first film, every distraction has been completely removed and it's literally just them two talking, and they more or less, other than this is like this fat allopatric just like barrier between them, other than that there's no real barriers to their actual relationship. Now you come at 9 years later and he's got he's got a kid and he's got a wife, which is quite a big barrier to this relationship that he wants to pursue, and she's got kind of her job where she is, and now her an unwillingness to believe in romance after so many failed relationships. Even the relationship she's in now, she prefers being alone. Even though she's in the relationship, she prefers it when he's away. So it kind of like, it's turned them both quite cynical, but you're right, as in her more than him. He's still now prodding at like, what if, what could be, while she's saying, it's kind of done, I'm spent now, I don't really want to do anything in terms of anything. She almost has a freak out in the car as well. And that kind of brings on to the film does feel relatively rushed, but I think it's meant to, just the fact that they only have, because it's like a real-time film, and it definitely feels like, and it almost feels like one shot, which is quite impressive, if not, I feel a little bit distracting. But you can definitely pick up kind of the urgency between these two characters, and like they both almost like open up really, really quickly to each other again, whether that's because of the closeness they've had, kind of just coming back, or I just feel it's a bit kind of like premature in the writing, but then they kind of knew they wouldn't have this much time. And maybe just like kind of the urgency is just kind of like a reflection of just like they're much more aware of the kind of the restrictions of the lives they have now than they were 9 years ago, and they don't want to miss that opportunity again. So they're making sure they say everything they want to say now before they regret it for another 9 years. And they also realize the rareness of like connecting with someone, because they talk about when they're young that you assume there's going to be lots and lots of people that you connect with on this like level, and they'll always be there. And now 9 years later, she's realizing, I haven't really had that with anyone apart from that one day in Vienna, and I'm not going to have it again. And now that kind of scares her, and it scares Ethan as well. And it's just interesting to see how they deal with that and how they don't want to miss out on it again. and that leads you to the big cliffhanger. Do they or don't they kind of stay together? Does he get that plane? And then again, it leads you to that, are you a cynic or a romantic? Are they gonna stay together, or does he leave? And I was like, as soon as it like faded to black, I was like, yeah, okay, he's gotten that plane. I was being cynical, and I was expecting then another 9 years later that they meet again by chance, and they're just again a little bit more sad, and a little bit more depressed, and a little bit more cynical. So then the next film was a bit of a nice uplift for me, at least. And yeah, that's more or less the main things I had to say about that film.
It was interesting because they don't actually introduce like the relationships that they're in until like it was like 40, 45 minutes in before you actually become aware that he's married and she's got a boyfriend and had boyfriends in the past and stuff like that, which I thought was an interesting way to go about it. Because Ross, I don't know if watching it this time whether up to that point you still thought, oh, maybe they're gonna get back together now, because you didn't know for 40 minutes, you weren't aware that they had like any commitments elsewhere. So this could have been like another, so they've had the night in Vienna, they're going to have the day in Paris to connect. Now they're going to try commit to a relationship.
I kind of assumed that something, like you would assume that something was going to happen in 9 years, like they wouldn't still both be single. But I think it's kind of awkward for them to talk about, because they obviously still have, after this time, they still have this kind of thing for each other, which you can tell because she literally goes to the bookshop to meet him in the first place after this long. But yeah, I think it's well done in that sense because it's well done in that sense because it would be an awkward thing to talk about, and neither of them really want to address it. But it's and you can tell when they do talk about it, they do kind of feel a bit awkward talking about it. And Ethan Hawke, Jesse just tries to brush it off a lot. And then I think Julie Delpy in the car, she really opens up about how she really feels, and it's really well done. But yeah, it's kind of weirdly satisfying that none of their relationships are going well. Like realistically, it must have been a pretty shit 9 years for both of them. But yeah, I think the fact it takes so long for you to hear about this is because it would just be so awkward to talk about that, and like neither of you really want to say it, but it kind of has to be said.
My favorite kind of it's all kind of blends into one scene, but my favorite quote unquote scene is the when they go on the little boat ride. This is the way the way that's filmed is really, really nice. But the stuff that's when you see in the way he's acting that he's really regretful about how the last 9 years have gone down, that they didn't end up together. Like he says that a couple of times. Like he's kind of just like, oh man, like I've now got this wife, I've now got a 4-year-old son. Like if only we managed to, if only your nan didn't die at that point, and so you could have come to Vienna that night, and then things could have been much different. That's when you really feel the regret in his voice and the way he's acting. Mason, there was that a scene that was particularly effective for you in conveying just what a deep connection these two people have, and how it's unfortunate they did at this point they hadn't got together.
Yeah, I think it's because Ethan Hawke's character has realized at this point that he really is like running out of time with her. Because as he gets on the boat, he's like, he shows back, he's like, oh no, it's fine. I've got 15 minutes or something like that. And she's like, what the fuck are you doing? You haven't got time to get on this boat. So I think that to him is like an immediate reminder that he literally now has minutes with her. He didn't have a lot of time with her in the first place, but now it's even more limited. So I feel like that's why he just sort of expresses this whole like what if that he's feeling. Like you said, where he's like, if only your nan died 2 days later or something like that, you would have been there and stuff like that. Like, I think, yeah, like you've said already, that sort of scene and that journey they go on quickly, like on that boat, is where he has to kind of come clean as to where he wants this to go. Because I feel like at that point, she's kind of accepted that he's married, he's not happy, but there's no chance of anything else happening between them. But after that point, that's when I think she gets it more, because like you said, straight after that, you have the scene of her in the cab, and she like has her breakdown and stuff like that, because she then has her like emotional release sort of straight after he does.
I can relate to him as someone who thinks you don't need to get to the airport until it's like hour and a half before the flight, unless it's Heathrow or Gatwick. Like little Vienna airport. You can just rock up. You rock up an hour before. It's calm. It's calm. But also like kind of some of the callbacks to the first film. Like there's one bit that stood out to me was when he like right at the start of Sunrise, when they get on the tram, and there's one point when they're like talking to each other, and he kind of like tentatively tries to like touch her hair, because like whether he's trying to like brush her hair out of her eye when they're talking to each other. And then in this one, they have a similar thing, but in the car, she tries to do it to him. Like that as like a little callback. And there was a few other ones I didn't note down. I can't remember at the time, but thought they were effective in showing how all the different ways they're still on the same level. They haven't changed. They even say that, I think, in this film. It might be in the other film, in the third film. I think it's in this film where they say like, yeah, people don't really change. Like stuff within your life changes, but ultimately you're still fundamentally like the same person. Okay, let's get some ratings. Mason?
I think this film sort of just carries on with the same formula as the first film, but delivers, I think, more within such a short period of time. Like I think the pacing is incredible in this film. So I give it an 8.4.
Matty?
Now, I didn't rate these as strongly. Just because as a standalone, I feel like cinematically it lacks quite a lot. I mean, it's impressive how they managed to do it in more or less a one shot. But I just felt too rushed. I gave it a 7.2.
Ross?
I like this bit. It's not as good as the first one because, as Matty said, it's kind of that one works so well as like a standalone, and it's just like a really nice romantic film to watch. This one's a lot deeper, and I don't think there's that same like excitement as the first film, so I rated it in 7.6.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes to new levels of depth and emotional depth in this film. As much as the first one's a bit more kind of wistful and enjoyable, I think this is a better film, so I gave it an 8.5. Okay, the final film in the trilogy, Before Midnight, Ross's pick from 2013. We meet Jesse and Celine 9 years on in Greece. Almost 2 decades have passed since their first meeting on that train bound for Vienna. Again, this was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, and Delpy was actually nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Actress. Ross, did you expect them to be married, 2 kids, not in America as well? So he had to leave his son. Was that what you were expecting when you started watching this film?
I was expecting to be together because I assumed when he said he did his nice Han Solo impression at the end, saying "I know." At the end, I assumed they were going to get together after that point, so I thought they'd be together. Yeah, where they'd be living and stuff, I had no idea. But yeah, but the first thing I noticed about this film, it feels less natural because of the way it's kind of shot and directed. Like it straight off, it kind of feels like you're watching, because they're in the airport. It kind of feels like you're watching a film, whereas the other ones you feel like you're there with them, kind of tracking through them. But this one, straight off, there's just loads of different shots, and it feels really different. And yeah, I think what I didn't enjoy about this film was one bit for the first 45 minutes, the conversation they're having it's not really about them. You're mainly just listening to kind of random conversations with people you've never. Randomish conversations with people you haven't met before, and it just felt I wasn't expecting it to be this different to the other films. I think it threw me a bit. But then after that kind of lunchtime conversation, you do get to them kind of walking and talking, tracking them, walking through the Greek streets, going to that little church and stuff, and it feels like really comforting to get back onto that level and watching them do that. So that was really nice. But then the rest of the film is pretty much just them like arguing. It's really well written. Like, don't get me wrong, it's really well written, them just arguing. But yeah, it's quite upsetting watching them argue. It's like your mum and dad is arguing, and you just want to be like, stop it. But then yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how I feel about the end either. It's kind of it's quite weird them arguing for about an hour, and then like the last like 30 seconds they just stop arguing. But at the same time, I suppose it's more like it's realistic. All the films are kind of just realistic about stuff, and it does put quite well puts a light on like real life stuff in reality. And it's not like the first film the perfect relationship isn't still there anymore, I guess, and it's kind of a reality of how couples would argue after that long into a relationship, and it's more about the real life issues that a married, well, a couple that have been together for that long would face, and the film does a really good job at capturing that. And yeah, it just kind of rounds off the films nicely as a trilogy. It's so, as I said, it's so different to the other films. It's not about kind of falling in love or rekindling love. It's about the problems. Yeah, I think in this film you could see kind of more positive glimpses of their relationship, because it is very kind of negative, the film. And I think the first two films have more of like an exciting feeling about them, because in them you're kind of watching a romance blossom and two people get together, and the whole time in them two films you're like, oh, they're gonna get together, they're gonna meet each other. So I think this film doesn't have that to it, but nevertheless it's very strong. It's probably the best written out of all of them. Still has that kind of natural raw feeling like the other films do. And yeah, it rounds off the trilogy so nicely, kind of watching love grow, evolve, and then the struggles that come along with it. And yeah, and I think this one really nicely shows as well not only how their relationship's grown, but how they've grown as a couple, or how they've grown as people individually as well. It really nicely does that.
It's interesting that you felt that way as well. Because yeah, when I watched it for the first time, last year, I was like, because there's only one of the three where you have like significant interactions with other characters. Basically, the only film that's got other meaningful characters in a way. So watching the film play out in that sense, and having time away from Celine and Jesse, and them not being together for like several like periods throughout the film, it's kind of a bit jarring. It's almost like they would like all the other characters were like intruding on my time with this couple that you'd like grown to kind of love in the first two films. So I think from a like thematic perspective, or just from like a filmmaking perspective, like that's perfectly fine. Like, still really, as Ross says, it's raw, it's realistic, and it's still a solid film. It's like the reason I come to these films was to spend time with Jesse and Celine and see how their relationship grows. So it's interesting in that sense. But I do like how this film opens with him. Obviously, he has the long conversation with his son, where you're kind of coming to terms with like the realities of having this relationship that's like a cross-country relationship, and him having to separate from his wife in America, and now the kid's got to live over there in America while I don't even know where they live in. They're probably still living in Paris, I imagine. They're in Greece on holiday. But I like the tracking shot of him walking out of the airport. It's like, so he says goodbye to his son, then it just follows him as he walks out the airport, away from that one life that he had previously into this is the life he now lives with Celine, and find out that he's got two daughters. And it's also interesting that this obviously came up with the second film, where he's wrote a book about the experience that they had in Vienna, and that's like carried on with this film. And it's just interesting because obviously the actors have a hand in creating these screenplays, and it's almost like the characters are like writing the story as it goes along, whilst Jesse literally within the films is actually writing their story, and he's bringing out another book, like an even more deeper philosophical book. I can't remember what the title was, some bullshit title, but that's just like an interesting in like a meta kind of way that yeah, it's not like it's not a normal trilogy, it's not a normal set of movies in that sense, where it feels like the characters are so integral to coming up with the story and how their relationship develops. And yeah, Ross says it does get a bit brutal when they have that argument. I watching it for the second time, I was kind of just like waiting on the edge of my seat, like, oh, at some point they're going to go to that hotel and they're going to have this like vicious argument, and we're going to feel shit about their relationship. But it's like, oh, no one can have love. This is going to come with these shitty problems. So that was kind of like tense when they had like a few moments in the film where it threatened to turn into an argument, like a few comments here and there, even in front of other people, like a few comments. So the tension was kind of simmering, and then it comes out and it explodes when they finally get to the hotel. Mason, did you find that similarly upsetting? Like Ross says, it's like your parents arguing. You're just like, no, please just stop.
Yeah, I find it so frustrating because obviously as you watch these films, and especially when you watch them like so close together, Like you said, you come to see these two be happy together, and supposedly the third film is them finally together, living together, and you want them to have this like perfect relationship because that's what they present to you in the first two films, that that's what they could have if they were to be together. So then when you start seeing them like make like comments towards each other at the dinner table, you're like, why are you doing that? You're not supposed to be these people. They're supposed to be other couples, not you two. And then they have that full-on argument, and I was just like, oh, for fuck's sake. I was like, there's no hope. Like, if this perfect couple is arguing, then what the fuck? Like, surely, yeah, it almost like hits you down. You're like, oh, for fuck's sake. But it's like what I said about the second film. It sort of teases to you that, like, yeah, this isn't a film. This is trying to show you what real life is like. And I think this film does that even more so. Like we've said, you always expect them to be this perfect couple, but they show you that every couple argues and they have these massive fights. And I think the ending shows that really well as well. It's where he's like, this isn't one of your fucking like princess like fairy tales. Like, this is real life, and it's not going to get any better than this. And it hits really hard, especially at like the right end of the film, because you're like, okay, right, yeah, speaking the truth. Like, you're gonna have to just accept this, really, that this is part of like every relationship. And yeah, I think, like you said, it's really upsetting because you view them, like you said, almost as this like mother father figure to us as the audience. So when they argue, you're just like, stop, like you don't need to do this. You're above this.
So what do we think of the ending? I'll go to you, mate. Like, it's kind of tinged with some happiness that she calmed down after the initial argument. I think she still reiterates to him that, like, she doesn't say it again, but she says, "Do you remember did you hear what I said in there when she said that she didn't love him?" But they kind of calmed the tension a bit. He brought a bit of humor to the table to try remind her of the connection that they have, and then they still need to try and overcome these problems. But where do you think, in 9 years, if they bring out a film in 2022, where do you think their relationship will be based on that ending?
Well, you say they used a bit of humor, and I feel like it's hard to say how realistic that argument resolution is, because I know some people are like, oh, that's kind of a bit bullshit. Like, all the issues they brought up, which are quite deep and intrinsic and like solidly cemented in the fact that there are like severe geographical boundaries that they want to move to, and no one wants to compromise on anything. And then the fact that he just like makes a little joke and reads off a napkin, and then everything's back to normal again, can be like quite hard to believe, a little bit flimsy in terms of a resolution. And you feel like, oh, even though then they're getting back to like on good terms again, the fact that she has just said she doesn't love him and nothing's actually changed in terms of the situation that they're in. He still has to deal with the fact that he's not going to be a father to his kid, and that she doesn't want to move all the way to America again. So it's kind of like, I feel like they will stay together and stuff. I don't think they'll split up over that, because it kind of gives you the resolution straight away and then leads off into the distance. So you can actually like, you don't have to see the finer details of how everything works out. You kind of just like, if you're romantic, you believe, oh, it will work out, hopefully. And yeah, I feel like it works because it's kind of not very, it's kind of, it goes away from normal cinema, because like the whole film itself, it kind of focuses on the working married life that cinema doesn't really focus on. Usually cinema's captivated on what the first film's about, the what ifs, kind of like the little perfect, just like the connection that's made, and it's all romantic, they're getting swept off their feet and everything leads off into the sunset kind of thing. And this film works with the nitty gritty. Relationships they can be wonderful, but they're work, and they can be hard, and they can be spiteful and bitter and angry, and it's about working through those things so that then they can look after their kids and just continue to kind of like be relatively stable together. And I think it gives you hope if you've ever had experiences where there's been like solid arguments that you didn't think you'd probably be able to recover from. And it's kind of the expression of anger in a relationship. He sees it as a bad thing and she sees it as a good thing. And then it kind of like puts it up for discussion. I think in an argument as well, when there is an expression of like how they're feeling at the moment, that there's something like that they believe in, that's like, it's intrinsic to them, like values they have, they're under attack from someone they supposedly love. So it feels like a betrayal, and they use the anger to express like, you're kind of violating something that I thought was precious between us. And then they kind of then from there, they can both see the severity of each other's actions, and it's no longer just little snide comments. They can actually get these feelings out on the table and actually work towards talking about them. And then once their feelings are out of the way, I feel like they understand the stakes, and then they can actually work towards a resolution about what they want to actually do. And that argument is brewing throughout the entire film, because that's the first thing it starts with, a kind of an ambiguous beginning. You're not really sure whether he's with the wife or he's left her and he's with Delphi or not. And you kind of see the issues. He's not going to be there for his son. And then, as you said, that the talk at the tables with the other characters, I enjoyed slightly the fact that they had other characters, but seeing the way this couple interacted with other couples was just a little bit painful. I feel like she belittled him quite a lot at the table, kind of like saying, "Oh, it's not romantic at all, and it's all rubbish." And then, "Oh, he wants me to move all that." Their ongoing argument, she kind of brings up in front of other people, and it just feels really quite uncomfortable. And you can feel that argument coming. So it's kind of, I'm glad they kind of like got it out of the way, so it wasn't something that's just swept under the rug. The film actually attacks these issues. And although it wasn't particularly comfortable, and the film feels a bit kind of disjointed, and an argument isn't a good thing to watch usually. It doesn't feel as good as the first film. I feel like it has better lessons in it than the first film.
I like as well how, like, we're kind of begrudging that it's not them walking around like a nice European city having these deep conversations. Like, we're kind of like that was the strength of the first two films, and especially the first one. But the reality is, like, this feels like they're reflecting on them aging and not being able to have like the same experience they could have had when they were younger. So it kind of like makes sense. It's like a nice combination. It makes sense that we don't get to see them walking around European cities anymore because they can't, because they've got two kids, and the only reason they are able to, they do get to do a bit of exploring in this film is because their kids are being looked after by that other Greek couple. So it's like an interesting way to go about it. But overall, what do you think of? Have we got a solution to their issue with the kid living in America? He wants to be there. He wants to be there to be a good dad, but they've got a life in Paris as well. How do we resolve this, Ross?
It's a tough thing, you know. I think Celine is very out of character in this film. She's way more irrational in this one than she is in the other films. So I think just to make it easier for Ethan Hawke, just do whatever she says is probably the easiest thing to do. I mean, anything he says, she kind of bites his head off, so he might as well just do what she says. And I think she said at one point as well, to be fair, she was like, "Well, you've missed like the start of his life, so what's the point of moving now when he's like 13? You're only going to be there for like a few years more." So yeah, I think just kind of, if they do move, they're only going to get like weekends or whatever it is. There's not much time. So I think maybe he would move there and end up being disappointed by not being to spend as much time as he wants to anyway. So in reality, he probably should just stay and keep it the way it is. Like, I think she said it as well. She's like, the relationship you two have now is good, to keep it that way. That, like, yeah, he's done fine without you being near him for most of his like growing up. So yeah, I think let's just do what Celine says. But maybe she could be a bit nicer about it. I don't know. But yeah.
His ex-wife sounds like a proper cunt there. Jesus Christ. Another thing I did like, there was, you know, the bit at the table with the old Greek lady she doesn't speak for like the whole time. It's kind of funny. She's kind of just like she's kind of like there just like nodding. Yeah, nodding and smiling. But like the first like 15, 20 minutes, however they're sitting around the table, and she gets that monologue. I can't even remember exactly what she was talking about. It was about like people passing through your lives and stuff like that. But she says the word sunset and she says sunrise. I like how the camera was like, it was behind Celine and Jesse's heads. It was like in the middle, put in between her as she says sunrise and sunset. It's like, oh, first two films, and now we're at midnight, and she's talking about all the life lessons and stuff. Nice little trick there. But yeah, she was so funny the way she was just like smiling and nodding for the whole time and not saying anything. I was like, kind of forgot. I completely forgot watching it the second time that she was actually going to say something. But we got anything else, Mason?
Yeah, like you said, that scene when they're all sat around the table I think is really good. The way that you have like three different like generations, like you have like the oldies at the end of the table, then you have the ones that we've been going through this journey with, and then you also have, is it the Greek couple who kind of offer like the same perspective as Jesse and Celine, where they're both like not young, they're probably like what, in their 50s or something, I don't know if I know. And they have like similar experiences, but it's then the young couple that you have there as well, where they're like, oh yeah, we didn't get to see each other, but we FaceTimed every night and fell asleep with each other. And it's just like, it's such a slap in the face for the two mains, because it's like, back then, like even giving your phone number probably would have been a bit of a struggle in my head, like, and they're there like FaceTiming every night and they're like texting all the time, and it's so mad to see such a change in generation between like the two. So I feel like the whole setup and having all of these other characters, at first I was like, dead, don't want it, I just want it to be them two. But yeah, like you said, it works so well to offer such different ideas on how they deal with relationships from like three totally different generations.
A house phone is not my problem. Ross?
So it just made me laugh when because I noticed whilst they're having the conversation around the table that she wasn't saying anything, and then she spoke, and then like it was just like, oh, my husband's dead. That's all I really got from what she was saying as well. And yeah, and I think maybe it's been 18 years, Jesse. Maybe you could switch up your facial hair a little bit. You got the same little beard going on there. Maybe just change it a little bit.
Okay, let's get some ratings. Start with you, Ross.
I think it feels so different to the other two films, and I don't think it's got that kind of excitement behind it that the other two do. It's got really good dialogue, but yeah, I think it does lack that excitement about them, whether they're going to get together or not, and they're kind of just there arguing, to put it plainly. But yeah, I gave it a 7.7.
Mason?
I think like when you consider it as like the end of the trilogy, I think it's really strong in showing how, like you said, Leon, how they've grown up themselves and they haven't got time to just be walking around the European cities and stuff like that. So because of that, I think it almost makes the film stronger to where it has developed its style and it offers like more perspective of other people being within their lives, because that's the life they now lead. So I gave it an 8.4.
Matty?
The film definitely has an arc. I feel like it's not a particularly strong arc in the way it's set out, and it feels a bit disjointed. In terms of like, I don't know, it doesn't really kind of like fit the consistency of the other two films. But I still enjoyed the film, and I feel like there's a lot to get from the film. In terms, I feel like the what is part of the trilogy is more important than the what if and what should have and could have been. So I'll give it a 7.8. I just feel like, as in terms of a film by itself, it's just not as strong as the first film, if you view that by itself.
I think they get better with each one, so I'll give this an 8.6. Okay, in terms of our average ratings, at number 1, we have the first film of the trilogy, Before Sunrise, with an 8.3. Then number 2, Before Midnight, with an 8.1. And third, Before Sunset, with a 7.9. In terms of where they go into the overall ranking, Sunrise in at number 13, Midnight 29, Sunset at 40. We've done 58 films thus far. Okay, actor of the week. Start with you, Mason.
I went for Julie Delphi. I think I really just enjoyed her character. I don't think I've seen her in anything else. I looked at her Wikipedia page and apparently she was in Age of Ultron. Fun knows. But yeah, compared to like the two leads, I feel like I enjoyed her performance more. I feel like she portrayed this really like cheerful, but kind of didn't really question anything. Like she just, took everything as it was, and I think I really enjoyed her performance basically.
Ross?
I think in the first film it's very much a level playing field. In the second film, maybe Julie Delpy was a bit better, but I think Ethan Hawke's performance in the last film really like shone through, and I think it outdid Delphy's performance. So I think overall I'll go with Ethan Hawke.
Matty?
I don't know, man. I'd probably. It's really hard to pick the difference between these two. Can it be a tie? No. I'll go with. Yeah, I'll agree with Mason. I'll go Julie Delpy.
Yeah, it was really tough this week. A lot of choices. Like, got the Austrian guy who was going to be a cow in the play. Got the Greek lad who was getting with that girl and they were Skyping every day. You got the driver who said a couple words in Before Sunset. So yeah, a lot of choices, but ultimately I also went for Julie Delpy. I thought the car scene I mentioned before, I thought that was a standout. She was really good at like going from between being like very like melancholy to then having a bit of like sarcastic humor. And she kind of did that. She kind of balanced that like pretty well, and it's pretty remarkable for someone who's not been in any like major like American films outside of this. Yeah, she was in Age of Ultron. I think she was Madam B. She was like, I think she was one of like, I can't even remember. I can't remember a lot of that film. She was in like 2 scenes as like one of the evil minions of whoever was working with Ultron or some shit. I think it might have been even been in the post-credit scene, you know. That might have been where she was. But yeah, not enough to really recognize her. Okay. The unique category for this week. Your favorite location. Got a few locations, a few nice, beautiful locations across these 3 films. What was your favorite, May?
I would have to say when they were in Greece and the little chapel. I've written this word down. I even looked at how to pronounce it, but I'm going to try anyway. Byzantine Chapel? Don't know. But yeah, I think we're halfway there. I really like that chapel. It's kind of like a nice, closed environment. And it kind of took like a moment, like when the camera became a lot closer and it stopped moving, and they kind of reached a new level of conversation when they were talking. I can't remember what they were talking about at the particular time, but I remember it made the conversation feel a lot more intimate. And it was a nice little bit of history, nice little building. I think it's like the only real kind of like bit of history that we saw in the whole film. So I enjoyed that bit.
Mason?
Mine probably has to be like Vienna as a whole, because comparing to like what I've seen of Vienna, it looks exactly the same. And this film was set like 30 years beforehand, like when I'd visited. Even like the trams look exactly the same as what they are now. And I guess more specifically, probably the theme park they go to. I feel like it's so like cinematic, but at the same time, yeah, they just. I feel like it's hard to explain. I feel like they really encapsulate what Vienna is in the films, whereas the others, I didn't really get that vibe like half as much. Like the Greece one, I was like, could be Italy and stuff like that. So yeah, I think Vienna, like they hit the nail on the head.
Ross?
I think I like him Before Midnight when they're walking through the streets of Greece. This is really nice. It kind of reminds me of Mamma Mia. Like I think I'd love to walk through there and just walk through with Meryl Streep and just sing "Take a Chance on Me" or something. Be really nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I went with Vienna as well, like Mason. I think that film is more than the other films is about the location. Like there's a lot of shots, like even at the end, where it kind of shows each place that they went to, and then it shows them on the train. So I think that it showcases the location more than anyone else. Kind of like, yeah, I'd like to explore that city at some point in life. Yeah, I wish this was a Pop Vinyl Award. Not tremendous options here this week, Ross, but what'd you come up with?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to pick. There's not a load of standout kind of looks that they have, but I think I went for Before Sunrise at the end, or like in the morning after they wake up, and Julie Delpy's just kind of, her hair's a bit messy, and she kind of, yeah, I went with that.
You know how they have like the like pop movie moments where it's like got like a bigger thing. I have that. It'd be like the side of like the train carriage when they first meet, something like that. Bit expansive, yeah. Be an interesting one. Okay, that's it. We're done for this week. Follow me at LiamWay98, Corona Cinema Podcast.wordpress.com, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Podbean. Next week, doing some Studio Ghibli films. Spirited Away, Grave of the Fireflies. Fireflies? Fireflies. Grave of the Fireflies. Fireflies. And Howl's Moving Castle. Until then, just go well, please.
Cheers.
I was like adamant that she was one of the people that helps like build Ultron. Vision, like Little Incubator. I thought she was one of those.
Nah, that's the Chinese lady.
No, that's how insignificant I thought she was. I thought she was one of the other three that just gets like killed.
Yeah.
Wow, no.
Julie Delpy?